One of my favorite memories of Mason is when we would play Call of Duty until 2 in the morning, and after every match, he would say just one more game until one of us would literally fall asleep playing. Mercedes writes, "He broke my arm once, remember that? But I also remember when Mason came to my ROTC dining out, and every time I talked, the entire night, his only response was, 'I don't speak blueberry.'" Michaela writes, "I remember when I showed him these necklaces," referring to the picture, "and he was like, 'I'm not wearing that all night.' And I was like, I'm sorry, but yes you are." Molly writes, "So many nights of video games and YouTube at the apartment. Him and Amanda constantly bickering, acting just like siblings. Living with you guys was the best experience. All of the games of Can Jam and board games at Amanda and Greg's. And ever so recently when you won your Xbox and everyone bugged him so that we went out and bought him one." I write, "Living together created so many good memories, like playing Town of Salem in the living room, and him getting mad when we would tell each other our roles. Or the time me and Mason walked down to get ice cream from Rose, in the middle of winter. We froze our butts off, but then ate ice cream to warm up." Erica writes, "I remember one night, you guys and some friends, staying up all night laughing and playing. You tried to convince me that our cat Oreo jumped out the window, and all of you couldn't stop laughing. And how one of your friends was telling a story. I think it went something like, there was once a guy, and then boom, he just fell down. I heard the crash and came downstairs just to see all of you guys rolling on the floor from laughter." Erica writes, "Another memory I have was this past Christmas when we were making the gingerbread house. Mason was sitting next to Neil and I. Neil and I were making the Sour Patch Kids kiss each other, and then we kissed each other. Mason had a smile on his face, but all he said was, 'Oh, gross.' Then we all laughed." I write, "When we were younger, we would challenge each other to do silly dares, like run back and forth 50 times, or jump on and off the bed 30 times. And if we couldn't do it, nothing would happen, but if we chickened out from the start, we would lose a point." Chelsea writes, "I went to Lowe's with your family and jumped on the flat cart Mason was pushing. And he kept pushing, but clearly was hoping the store associate would ask me to get off. And they said, 'She's fine.' His face was priceless. Later that day I had dinner with your family, and without prompt, you all went around the table and said something good that happened that day. It warmed my heart to see such a loving, supportive family. Your dad cooked the most delicious acorn squash with brown sugar, and I asked if anyone was going to have the last piece, and he said, 'You are.' Instantly I knew where Mason got his amazing good nature and friendliness. We played outside, and I remember you and Sadie playing in the leaves, and Mason and I sat in his basement room and threw a foam football back and forth for hours." I write, "Recently, we were playing a board game and I looked him dead in the eyes and asked if he was a good guy. He straight-faced told me he was good, and then as soon as his turn came around, he made the bad guys win because he was a bad guy. I was so mad because I put my full trust in him to win for the good guys, and he played me for a fool. Best night of board games I will ever have. Molly writes, all the fail army. I write, we watched it till 1 a.m. when I had a test the next day, just because the one guy blew up a toaster. Abby writes, I remember how we would have game night, and almost every time we would end up watching Fail Army for at least a little bit, and we couldn't forget the number of times we watched the Watermelon Vines. Danita writes, when I first cut my bangs, I went to Giant Eagle, and of course Mason was working. I passed him 3 times, and all 3 times I said hi to him. He looked very confused, and said hi back all 3 times. Then a week later, I came in again, and he was at the register. It was then he finally realized it was me, his cousin, that was there the last time. We just had a really good laugh, and I was on my way. Abby writes, one time, Mark went to Giant Eagle to get peppermint because it's supposed to repel ants. Mark went through Mason's line with peppermint sprinkles. Mark told Mason what he was using it for, and Mason laughed and told him, this is pure sugar. Mason helped him get the correct item. Thank you for preventing my husband from spraying the house with sugar water. Abby writes, once I was over for Halloween. Mason always tried to get me to try weird alcohol. For some reason, he had jalapeno wine. I tried it, and it was probably one of the weirdest things I have ever tasted. I couldn't tell if I hated it or if it wasn't half bad. Next time I have a weird drink, I will think of him. It was a fun night with friends. Amanda writes, the last board game night we had, Jonah finally gave Mason a smile, and Mason totally found a baby he could like. We played that game Greg had just made. Mason and I were bad guys together, so of course we lost, because the running joke was never trust Mason at this kind of game. And then, there was all the times we played werewolf, and he was always kicked out first. Linda writes, I had the privilege of babysitting him and his sisters one summer, so I am so glad I got to spend that time with him. I remember his high school graduation party when he was outside telling me the menu in the house. And I was teasing him about I don't know what, but then he pointed out that because of my interruptions, he was starting over for the 3rd time. I let him finish that time. His smile was infectious, especially the way his lips would curl in the Clark way. Linda writes, Grandma Jane was reminiscing today about picking him up after school and walking back to her apartment. She never seemed to have enough goodies for him to snack on after school, except this one day when she had just gone grocery shopping. Mason opened the refrigerator door, which is packed full, and exclaimed, all my prayers are answered. Mark writes, I'll miss the time he was going to have me try his ice cream and handed me a bit of his cone, and I ate the cone. When he went to scoop some ice cream, I had already devoured the cone. The look on his face was priceless. Bob writes, one time Mason and I were walking out of Giant Eagle, and I did my Timmy voice really loud, that I do time to time. As we sat in my car, Mason looks at me and says, no wonder you're a virgin, Dad. Michaela writes, there have been a couple times that I've gone into Giant Eagle and he has paged me over the intercom. Michaela, to the front! It was so funny to see him standing up front, laughing when I would come out of an aisle. He thought it was so funny. Abby writes, Mark and Mason, who played this game called Rocket League. It was like soccer, but with cars. Anyway, there's a mode on it where it's a basketball hoop and you can edit the settings. So we made the ball as large as possible and as bouncy as possible. It was so hard, Molly and I even tried it. It took us 20 minutes to finally get the ball in the hoop once, and we realized we glitched the game. The ball was too big for the game to register it when it was in the hoop. We all looked at it and laughed. I write, Mason bonded with me over many games, but one in particular was The Binding of Isaac, and his favorite boss was this, referring to a picture. Another game we played together was Minecraft. One semester, we spent hours upon hours making a custom world, where you went through a city, to a castle, to a science center. Hours were spent clearing blocks, and even more were spent placing them. Molly writes, Every time I would see a poop emoji, I would tell him that it was him/his picture. I got him a cup covered in poop emojis a couple of weeks ago to use at my house. I presented it to him by hiding it behind my back, and said, I got you a cup with your picture all over it. He was not amused, but he loved it and used it a few times. I write, When we first roomed together, no matter what he was doing, if he was studying, doing homework, or playing video games, he was always watching that 70s show. I probably saw that show in its entirety 20 times because of him. Sometimes a week would go by, and he would already be re-watching episodes. Molly writes, Malcolm in the Middle, and It's Always Sunny too. I watched Malcolm in the Middle when I was younger, but he forced me to watch Sunny. I tried to deny liking it, but it was one of his favorites, so of course I liked it. He always laughs so hard. We have so many shows that we watched together. Supernatural and Community were the big ones. Unfortunately, we did not finish either of these series together. I write, He was always sending me Sunny memes, and of course, our group love for Shrek. Molly writes, Can't forget the Game Grumps and JonTron. I write, We watched them play Sonic Boom for at least an hour one night, even though it was painful to watch. Mark writes, That time I slapped pizza out of his hand and he started laughing hysterically. I write, One time we were getting dinner, he got some chicken tenders and fries, and when we were leaving, some guy slammed the door in Mason's face, causing his tenders and fries to fly everywhere. The guy looked at him, shrugged, and walked away. Mason was more confused than angry, but in the end, they gave him free food, and we laughed about it for hours later on. I write, Mason would sleep in the mornings, so I wouldn't grab my keys when going to the floor showers. And one particular morning, he decided to get up early and lock me out. I was in the hall with nothing but a towel on, banging on the door for him to wake up. Of course he wasn't in the room to wake up, but the whole floor sure did wake up and yell at me. After about 10 minutes, he finally comes out of the showers to let me into the room. I was so angry, yet laughed so hard after it all was over. I write, How about when there were the blackouts, and Molly had to spend the night, since they evacuated the Highlands? Molly had to use the bathroom, but because I'm a weird sleeper, I woke up from her just touching the doorknob. Later that night, a transformer literally exploded, and I slept through it. He thought it was so funny I slept through the explosion, yet woke up for the doorknob getting touched. Molly writes, That was amazing. I tried to be so quiet, but Mason warned me that you would still wake up. Kyle writes, I'm glad I got to hang out with Mason last Friday. He had me meet more of his friends and always welcomed me like he knew me for a very long time. Last Friday was the first time I ever did karaoke. I never did before because of stage fright ever since I was a kid. But I ended up doing it anyway because of how much I trusted being myself around Mason and Molly, because of how friendly and welcoming they are. Mason writes, Mason and I were in the same wedding for Mark and Abby. We got sick of people calling us the same name, so we asked the wedding party to call him Redbeard and me Blackbeard. We would laugh so much. Also, I helped him get into Perseus' house, which he loved, fresh out of college, and where we were both Mr. Mason. Molly writes, I'm at PetSmart, and there is a Jeep identical to what Mason had. The thing was so terrifying to ride in, but he was so excited to have his own car. I'm glad he got the bean. I felt so safe with him in that car, and he had a CD/radio. I write, I remember just going from my house to his house in the Jeep, and every bump we hit was terrifying. The sounds that thing made to the smell of the back seat. Abby writes, I do not think I ever rode in that Jeep, but I remember how we got him the custom license plate for his coffee bean, and how it took Mark and I longer than I thought it would to put it on his car while he was in Otis 12 with Molly, waiting for us to get there for his birthday dinner. Then when he came out and saw it, and said, so this is why you guys were late. Molly writes, I still can't believe the dead bird that Michael left for us on the top of that Jeep, and all the nuts and seeds of whatever animal had been living back there. Mark writes, I rode in the Jeep once. I think it was terrifying. Amanda writes, holidays with the twins and all their kids were my favorite. I love having everyone at our house. This past Christmas was a blast with our gingerbread contest. And our early Thanksgiving this past year when we decided to not let Greg make his watery stuffing. Is that the night you guys played ninja tag in the front yard? Molly writes, I don't remember which holiday that was, but it was freezing. Molly writes, I'll never forget the time that we were in Pittsburgh with Abby and Mark. We went into Target to pass some time. We were in the men's section, and Mason let out one of the worst farts ever. Mark and Abby were laughing, but I never wanted to hit Mason so hard. Amanda writes, I'm glad someone brought up his farting. I remember the tent city we had set up one summer. I totally got woken up by Mason's farting. I remember nudging Greg and telling him I felt so bad for Molly being zipped into the tent with him. Molly writes, I already don't sleep in new places, and that did not help. He was sleeping through most of them. The cinnamon challenge was popular when we had that camp out. Does anyone else remember Mason doing the cayenne challenge instead? I was thinking about that night today. I think that was the day that he realized that I was sticking around for a while because I let him use my toothbrush to get all the cayenne out of his mouth. Molly writes, one time at my old dorm, we were lying in bed and just being silly. We were looking just at food on Amazon, and Mason said, I wonder what the most expensive thing is. I jokingly said, it's probably like $6,000 worth of beef. I don't know where this idea came from, but that's what I blurted out. The next thing I know, Mason has his phone up and is completely blown away. The most expensive food item was, believe it or not, roughly $6,000 worth of dried, jerky-like beef. We could not believe what just happened. I laughed until I cried. We definitely had trouble falling asleep after that. We just made a joke about the night a couple of days ago. Abby writes, one time we played darts, and we somehow decided that we should throw all 6 darts at once and add our score that way. Mark went first and got 1 point. Mason laughed, said that shouldn't be hard to beat, and then he got 0 points. The look on his face was great. I'm pretty sure Molly won that game. Molly writes, that was so funny. I knew he wasn't going to score. I think I got 5 and you got 4. Something low like that. Neither of us got a higher score than 5. Amanda writes, I was putting away games and saw that codename game. Made me think of the buffalo wings clue that I couldn't get. It couldn't possibly be buffalo.
Bye.